Hey my friends, it's Kevin here. In this video, we're going to talk about the difference between agency versus fractional versus advisory business models, particularly in the marketing arena, but I can probably apply to other verticals. And so just to give you a really quick background, I've freelanced since the early 2000s as a web designer and eventually doing other things, mostly just part-time for friends and family and then the companies that I work for. I eventually went full-time as a B2B marketing agency and web design agency in 2015. And I started advising then shortly after, a couple of years after going full-time. I started breaking into this advisory world. It was just an instinctive process that I followed. I was basically like, why don't I just try to sell the thing that I'm best at and delegate the rest and make it work in a way that everyone wins and everyone's profitable, and I don't have to have a big team that I have to manage and that sort of thing. So I kind of got into advising and fractional CMO work in 2016, and I'm currently doing that, and I'm currently mentoring other marketing professionals as well, and that's the reason for this video. So I just want to talk about these three business models and really kind of compare them on a few of the axes that stand out and matter to me the most. So if you think about it with an agency, fractional CMO, and advisory, I just realized those things aren't even aligned. The agency model, you have many clients, and so you're kind of juggling mentally at all times a high number of clients because that's how the business works. So you have to, if you want to get more profitable, you have to get more clients. You also have, if you're doing full service agency work, you're doing about 30% margins. Some can do maybe closer to 40, some can do maybe 20 or less. As a general rule, and I'm not an agency professional, but as a general rule, the more services you provide, the smaller your margins are likely to be, because you don't have the economies of scale and the efficiencies of running very dialed in processes with very few people. You have to have lots of people for lots of services, or else you're on the risk of doing things poorly and then your prices are going to get lower. So suffice it to say, agencies run at about 30%. They can go higher or lower. That's just a kind of a rule of thumb. It scales by hiring. So as you want to get bigger, if you want to sell and you want to do more revenue, people are going to hit their plateaus. You're going to need more humans, more manpower, and that's where scaling through hiring happens. There tends to be a high cognitive load for the owner and for the people involved. It is implementation, it is execution at the end of the day. And so you're always thinking about, what do I have to do next? Juggling plates, juggling balls and spinning plates, if you will. And so there's a high cognitive load associated with that, which means there's always constant deadlines as well. So I remember when I was running an agency, I was always thinking, okay, what's due next? What do I have to do? And even when I was going to bed, I was thinking, what do I have to do tomorrow? All these things that I had to do in order to keep running the business were hitting me at all hours of the night. Couldn't really go on vacations without relaxing. So that cognitive load, that mental load that comes with an agency is pretty real. And you can run it really organized and efficiently, but it's still more stressful in my experience than some of the other models we're about to talk about. You're typically paid for deliverables, so what people are looking for is the thing completed and on a platter and it's done, and that can look in the form of decks, or it can look in the form of you doing execution, ads, SEO, design, what have you. But deliverables are the name of the game, and obviously your expertise matters. But at the end of the day, the tangible thing they're buying is the thing that you deliver to them. There's extensive reporting. Typically, you pretty much have to report on all the different things that you've worked on, all the things you're doing, and what are the results. And so you tend to be the one having to produce these things, typically on a monthly basis, sometimes on a weekly basis, depending on the kind of business you run. You're managing many projects, just like I mentioned, many clients, many projects, and so you're always thinking about, okay, what needs to get done next? You have to be very organized to run an agency at any kind of a scale. Otherwise, you're going to be flying by the seat of your pants, and you're going to be making mistakes, dropping balls, and that's going to increase your stress and decrease your margin. So not fun overall. And at the end of the day, it's a good and effective hourly rate if you're doing it right. Let's say you're making 30% margins. Ideally, that makes it worthwhile for you and your time, and pays you better than you would at a job. Because at the end of the day, if it's not paying you better than you would get at a job, then you're really not being compensated for your risk, and you're not really therefore very profitable. So let's look at the fractional CMO model. You typically have fewer clients, maybe 5. Some people can do upwards of 10, but to me that's a lot. You have high margins, so that the actual cost to deliver is very low. You might have some software expenses, some insurance, and some other basic overheads, depending on your business. Of course, you could also have office space. You could have all these other. You could have an admin person. But for me, it's been over 90% margins, and my cost of goods sold, it's basically all profit in terms of what the costs are to deliver the services to my clients. So at the end of the day, I could drop all my expenses and run very lean, and this is what it would look like. So it's because I'm not marking up anyone else's time. And for those who don't know, a fractional CMO is really there to manage and advise their clients to get a business result. They bring in various people to do the execution. They might do some light execution work themselves. They might get their hands on the keyboard and write some copy and do some blog posts and manage some ads. Whatever your core competency is, you're likely to get pulled into and use your hands a little bit. Unlike advisory, where it's no hands work other than maybe to create proof of concepts, that kind of thing. But you're looking at about 90% margins for the fractional CMO model. It scales by teaching. So once you've reached your client plateau, the way you scale is to teach, to sell your intellectual property, to do training, to do courses, whatever else you want to do. But it's typically around teaching and intellectual property selling. That's the way advisory scales also. There is typically a high cognitive load with the fractional CMO model, and that's one of the reasons I didn't love it, is because I kind of replaced an agency model where at least I had a bit of leverage through people to now being responsible for my multiple clients, having to do all the different projects, keep all the balls in the air, and then, you know, typically the way it works is that clients are always going to want more from you because you typically charge a fixed fee, and so it's kind of more, and that's the way it goes. Sorry for the background noise. Hopefully I can mitigate some of that in post. So there's that high cognitive load, and if you're like me, you like to be relaxed. You like to be sitting in your backyard, you know, doing some work on a nice sunny day, and you don't want to be stressed out. And so the advisory model is the lowest of all of the cognitive loads here, and one that I obviously am biased towards, but I'll talk about it towards the end. So there are lots of deadlines. Some of them are self-imposed. You have a bit of freedom, but at the end of the day, the buck stops with you. Stuff is either getting done or not, depending on you. And unlike an agency where you can kind of limit scope to a few different channels, as a fractional CMO, all the channels are within scope. You have to figure out how to get all of it done, find all the people to do all the things. And so there is a bit of that stress, and you have to manage all the projects, and you have to do some implementation. You have to brief people. You have to quality assure everything. It's quite a lot of work. So you want to charge a lot of money and have very few clients in order to keep yourself sane at the end of the day. So at the end of the day, you're also paid to lead and manage, and that's what people are looking for. They're not necessarily looking for you to do all the work yourself, although clients will typically want you to do some of the work yourself. But typically you're there to lead and manage, and to be a manager of sorts, and not to be the one doing all the tasks, but to be producing all the work at the end of the day. It's very similar to running an agency. If you've ever run an agency with outsourced people to help you, it's kind of the same idea, except there's more and it's less neat. So it's a little trickier to fit into all the neat boxes of SEO, ads, all the different verticals and channels that you're working on. Extensive reporting, so that's going to be on you. You're going to have to create all the reports. There's a KPI sheet that you're going to probably want to have, update, and maintain yourself, as well as maybe some marketing analytics numbers that you may or may not want to deliver to your clients, depending on their preferences. But you do have to do all the reporting yourself. You're managing the projects. That's actually supposed to say managing a few projects, but there can be many projects there. Certainly less than running an agency, but because you're doing all of marketing for a company, there does tend to be a lot of projects still to do, and therefore it can be a lot to manage. Now you do get a pretty high effective hourly rate, so good fractional CMOs are charging upwards of 10 grand per month, and maybe have 3-4 clients, or some of them more. And so your effective hourly rate's high, but your stress levels are fairly high. But it can be a very great way to make 6 figures right out of the gate with 1 or 2 clients, and then go into more leveraged, more lightweight retainers after that. You do want to think about key client risk, because you have such a few clients. There is that client concentration risk, and that's a real factor. So you just want to take that into account as well. So that's the fractional CMO model. And the advisory model is the last one. Advising to me is my bread and butter. It's the thing I've been doing the longest, and it's what I'm best at. And it's not about managing. It's about leading and producing and helping your clients know exactly what to do, when to do it, how to do it, who to do it with, where to spend money, where to save money. It's analytical, it's strategic, and it's tactical as well. You are still in the weeds of the tactics, but you're just not doing them. You're not managing them. So you have very few clients. I find by 7 clients, I'm kind of done. At least cognitively, I don't want to take on more. I do mentor people. I have a Slack-based mentorship and a community. You can check that out at howtoselladvice.com. But basically, that's where I would go in and I work with people one-to-one. But they're marketers and they're consultants, and so it's a lot lower for me cognitive load-wise than working with companies who need help with their overall marketing, where it's a lot more involved, and they need me to be very immersed in their businesses. But I do have very few clients, so 7 is probably the maximum I would take on. I aim for about 5, and I charge between 5 and 7K per client, sometimes a little less if they've worked with me for a long time. They go on a lower level of service, but generally speaking, a handful of clients or so, and I've got a very, very good, very healthy multi-six-figure profit business. And as we'll see, there's some other benefits in here. So it's high margin. It scales by teaching, so that's why it's part of why I do this stuff, is that I can teach people at scale, and they tend to be marketing strategists and consultants. And so after I've kind of filled up on consulting work and one-to-one work, I can then teach. I can create intellectual property. I can create documents, templates, assets that I can sell. I've got a membership, for example. And so that's how it scales, is through teaching at the long tail. You can do that with an agency model as well, but that's just not typically the way the model works. It's usually scaled through labor. So it has a fairly low cognitive load when I'm not on a call with clients, unless there's a big problem in their business. I don't have to think a ton about them. I keep good notes while I'm working with the client, and then we have our call. The client knows what to do. I know what to do. I might have some follow-up emails between calls to make sure everything is going the way it should. I keep an eye on a lot of things. I'll coax and I'll kind of check in on some stuff, but I'm not leading. I'm not managing projects. I am leading. I'm just not managing projects, and I'm making sure that the right things are being done with the right people on the right time, in the right way, and de-risking the project for all the projects for the clients, including how much money they're spending and making sure they're getting the most return from their investment. And so that it surprisingly doesn't have as high cognitive load as managing projects. To me, managing projects is super critical. It's a skill in and of itself, and it needs to be done very well. There are simple ways to do it. I use Google Docs for it, and it works well, and I show my clients how to do the same thing. However, the cognitive load associated with managing projects is just not worth it for me. I'd rather help my clients do that. I have a Google Docs sheet that I open up, which says open loops, and it keeps all the different open loops that we have, like ongoing projects, and everyone knows who's doing what and when and how that's going to work, so that we can go to that part of the document and see that all in one place. But it keeps cognitive load down, which is the name of the game, in my opinion. Delegated deadlines, so I'm not responsible for delivering things on a deadline. I have to help make sure my clients get their deadlines met through the people they're working with, and just through their own efforts. But they're not my deadlines typically, they're the client's deadlines, and my job is to help them accomplish those. So really I'm paid to advise and facilitate, to make things easier. That's what facilitate means. So whether that's making introductions to the right people so they don't have to interview 10 people, giving proof of concepts and templates and examples of things so that the client's able to see what needs to be done, or the supplier that we're working with when we're doing a project is able to see examples of the type of work we're looking for. That can work really, really well. So unlike the other services where I'm not so much paid for the deliverables, and I'm not so much paid to manage, I'm really there to de-risk and to advise and to lead the client through the intricacies of growing their business through marketing. The next part about reporting is, instead of me doing massive reporting, I help the client. I have a template, a KPI sheet. You can get access to this as a member if you're interested in the membership that I mentioned at howtoselladvice.com. But the client updates their own KPI sheet. It's a Google sheet, and it takes them about an hour, maybe if they're a bigger business, or a little less. But it's not a hugely time-intensive thing. They do it once per month. We can see it on a dashboard. We can see all their key numbers for upwards of 10 years into the future, and it's a really great tool to have. But at the end of the day, the client is managing that themselves. They're doing that part themselves. And they also manage the projects, so it's not me that's having to manage those things. It's the client, and again, I use a simple Google Doc to make their lives easier, and they can then manage the projects and tasks however they manage the rest of their business. It's not up to me to impose a management style on their business, but I do help by creating a very simple format, which is the open loops format, and I'll share that in another video. But it's basically, here are all the projects we're working on, here are the subtasks within it, and here's who's responsible for it, and that way at a glance we can see like what are the main things that we're working on actively right now. But the client manages that. So once we've finished our call, client knows that we've got all the marching orders, we know who we're working with, we know what we're doing, and onward they go. As far as effective hourly rate, by far this is the highest hourly rate I've had of the three models, and largely because it's the long tail of execution are done by other people, and because I'm not managing projects, because I'm not doing the implementation, the execution work myself, and that's being done by other people, it's really the most high leverage, high value portion of the work. Assuming I can get business results for my clients, which is what they pay me for, and they stay with me a long time when I do, it ends up meaning that my effective hourly rate's quite high. So my effective hourly rate's around $800 US per hour. in terms of meetings. And so that's when I take basically how much I make in a month divided by the meeting hours on my calendar that month, and that's the effective hourly rate. And then of course there's some light email work, some Slack stuff that happens between calls. Of course, I'm always thinking about my clients, but not a ton, not in the stressful kind, but more about thinking about ways I can advance and be more strategic and more advantageous for my clients. And so I don't take that into account. I don't take the emails back and forth into account, or sometimes I'll have to review work and that kind of thing. But this is, even if you took that into account, it's not an extensive amount of time. There's a fair bit of free time in my day to do these things and to do other things. And so by far, it's the highest effective hourly rate, and I highly recommend the advisory model over the fractional CMO model if you can do it. And I think part of it is, you have to have documented. You have to have intellectual property. You have to have expertise. You have to have proof. You have to be credible that you're able to get business results for your clients without using your hands. Because at the end of the day, clients are going to want you to use your hands whenever possible, and they're going to want you to do the execution work. That's why agencies are the easiest thing to sell. Fractional CMO model is perfect for that kind of company who is looking for a marketing manager but isn't really ready to hire them full-time just yet. Maybe it's too early in their business to hire a full-time marketing manager. They just can't justify it, but they would love to have someone at your expertise level, at a senior expertise or intermediate and above, to be able to manage and advise and to do stuff, to get things done, to be a producer. And at the end of the day, that's a very compelling option. And for a lot of people, I recommend getting 1 or 2 clients at that fractional CMO model, maybe even more if you want to do that, so that you can refine your intellectual property. You can basically create more templates, create more process, find more examples, and really be able to leverage your repeatable processes and your intellectual property, your documents, your templates, your methods, so that you don't have to do as much labor, and it's not as hard for you to do it for the next client, and so on and so forth. So doing implementation either as an agency or a fractional CMO is a great way to build to build your expertise and to build those foundations, such that every additional client that you work with is going to be less labor intensive, and by the time you can sell advisory, it's going to be a lot more it's a lot more profitable on an effective hourly rate basis. So it's taken a lot of years to get here to be able to sell pure advisory. I only have one current interim CMO client right now, which is an old client that I've had since 2019, where I'm basically managing and babysitting their marketing, but it's quite simple because we've already built over many years the infrastructure involved in their marketing. And so I've worked with them for a long time. That's an example of a kind of client who sticks around once you get good results. And so it's very low touch, but I still kind of lead and manage projects, but they're very few and far between. But typically 99% of my consulting business is advising. And now I've introduced over the last couple of years this mentoring stuff. So helping marketing consultants build more profitable businesses, helping them get into consulting in the first place, or at least break free of a full service agency model, which is inherently stressful and difficult and hard to get traction in, especially as a soloist, to doing something that's higher profit, higher leverage. And frankly, the advisory model is great. Now, the thing about it is that you have to eventually stop selling implementation and say, hey, I can still help you, and net is going to cost the same as hiring me as a full service agency for you. But we're going to do things a little differently. In fact, I'm going to be impartial to how we get things done. We can work with my suppliers or people and as long as we get the business result within the budget that we have, we're happy. We can work on it, we can optimize it, we can improve it. And so, it's kind of a way, it's how you sell it really kind of builds that trust with your clients or not. But it is a more advanced model, so I think if you haven't sold fractional CMO models, it's probably not the worst place to start. Just know that it's kind of like owning a job. Your client will eventually want more and more done. And I don't really recommend billing by the hour, but yeah, so doing that work allows you to build the groundwork, the process, and your mindset around it, so that eventually you're like, basically it's the same thing, except you're going to manage the projects. I'm going to show you how to manage it. I'm going to make it easy for you. I'm going to remove all roadblocks. I'm going to introduce you to the right suppliers, the right price point from different parts of the world and locally, and work with the right people to do the right job. And so that's where you get into advising once you have that confidence and you've done these things for a while. And so fractional is a great way to kind of have that intermediary step for that business who's won to say $5 million, maybe $10 million maximum in revenue, who doesn't have a marketing manager, but needs more marketing support and more oversight and more direction. And so these are the 3 ways. I'll just really quickly kind of show you how I got into consulting and how you can do the same if you want. Keep your current thing running, keep your business or your job until you have some clients. And so if you have an agency, what I did was I kept my agency website over there. And then I built another one under my own name and started saying, for all new leads that came to me, I said, hey, look, I don't do this anymore, but here's what I do. It's basically the same thing, but like it's kind of like a deconstructed marketing agency. So I'll help you do it for a fixed fee. I'll basically give you access to all the suppliers I would normally mark up, and I'll help you produce the business result you're looking for within your budgets, and try to help you, really strategize on your side of the table. Because I'm not incentivized by implementation, I'm just incentivized. I have a fixed fee, and so my incentive is to create the best outcome for the client possible within their budget, and my fees are the same no matter what we do and who we work with. And so it really puts me on their side of the table. And so you have to kind of take the leads and take the opportunities that are coming your way via word of mouth and your marketing efforts that used to go to your agency, and now you have to try to sell as a fractional CMO or an advisor. There's lots more of this on this channel. You can look into those things, as well as go to kevin.me, and you can, there's hundreds and hundreds of articles on all this stuff. So go check that out if you want, but keep your main thing the main thing. Take on, if you will, like an anchor client or two as a fractional CMO or a managed service provider, consultant who manages, and that can help you, get 6 figures within 1 or 2 clients of income, which will keep the bills paid and keep the lights on. And then you can start to price that fractional CMO, or what I do is interim CMO, where I limit it to a maximum of 3 months and charge upwards of 10 grand per month for a maximum of 3 months, and then move to an advisory role once the infrastructure, once the pieces are in play, once the projects are underway. I start to help the client manage them internally, and I'll oversee it, and I'll facilitate the marketing for them on their behalf. And so that's another way you can do it. But you start to price up the fractional CMO price service that you have, and then for around 3,000 to 5,000, maybe 6,000, you can advise, or more, or less, depending on your stage of seniority in business and credibility. But it makes the advisory look compelling when your fractional managed model is 10 grand, but the client can basically manage, and you'll advise them for half of that. And so it makes that price point more compelling for clients, and allows you to kind of position and base it on value. If we grow your business by this, here's why that's a no-brainer. Keep your current thing the main thing. Take 1 or 2 anchor clients at a higher ticket so that you can get a good salary right off the bat, and then use that as leverage mentally, if you will, to start only advising and to do other more high leverage activities. That's where you end up in advisory, and that looks like a really good sweet spot for you and for your prospects. So that's it for this video. If you like this kind of stuff, head over to kevin.me, and you can get on my mailing list. I write a few times a week for marketing consultants on how to build more leverage and profitable businesses by selling their expertise and not just their hands. And so you can learn about the membership as well. There's a link to it right in my navigation. It's also at howtoselladvice.com. But that's it for this video, and I'll see you in the next one. If you like it, please give it a thumbs up. Be sure to subscribe, and head over to kevin.me. The mailing list is where all the money is. Okay, bye for now, my friend.